and welcome back to the Mess Room podcast. Once again, I'm joined by Jordan and Mike and myself, Will. Um, we just want to thank everyone for the response on the first initial episode last week. Some great comments, and we're taking into consideration all of your suggestions for topics and such. But for now, this is us for the second time.
Yeah, it's really exciting. It's really cool that at least anyone has decided to listen to us ramble, and that's why we're doing it
100%.
again.
I didn't. I genuinely, when the idea was brainstormed, and I think the amount of attention that the first one's got, I think we couldn't have done better personally for the first episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're doing. It's exciting. It's exciting. So anyway, the topic of this second, hopefully a bit longer episode, is Railtours. Um, so it's we're mainly going to go on our own experiences because we don't know too much about everything to do with Railtours, but we're going to try and say about our experiences, the knowledge that we have about Railtours, about the running of Railtours, and we'll just see where we go. How did Railtours come about?
Well, as far as I'm aware, they pretty much have been around since the beginning of the railways. I remember seeing photographs of, or paintings at least, of when the rocket was first built, and it was built. There was a circle built for it, and you could just come along and have a ride. Whether that's you could call that a rail tour, I don't know, but that's
Really?
pretty much it was. It was purely for the entertainment of Victorian people.
Where was that
Um,
too? Do you have
oh,
any?
it was up in the northwest somewhere because, of course, Stevenson built the rocket, and he was based up in the northwest or the northeast. Can't remember. Um, but that I remember seeing photographs of that. So, and obviously over the years of the railways developed, people like the LNER used to do rail tours with the Stirling single. They used to do stunts with that and Flying Scotsman when that was first built, because obviously Flying Scotsman was revolutionary in locomotive design. And then into BR, you had clubs started popping up, like the Locomotive Club of Great Britain, the Stevenson Locomotive Society, and they did all sorts of tours. Like, well, the Locomotive Club of Great Britain would basically go somewhere, particularly in the later days of BR, when there was still any type of pre-grouping design that was still around. Take the engine, go for a jolly with it, with 4 or 5 coaches, and just pack them out.
It was the same with Ian Allen,
Yeah,
the publishing, but the railway sort of train sports guides. They did rail tours. I think quite a few of them down sort of out of Waterloo, down towards the south of England, down towards
that's right.
down.
Yeah, in the later years of BR, Ian Allen loved to do it with, and the Locomotive Club of Great Britain actually. They both love to take LNER Pacifics and shove them on the southern region, which is quite interesting. But of course, Ian Allen was most famous for did the Talloclin specials when the Talloclin first opened in the 50s. Well, first opened, I say reopened as the first preserve line. And they used to do that and the Festiniog trips. They used to take a couple of manors and just go up the Cambrian line.
Because why not?
Yeah, and then obviously you go into dieselization, and Railtours continue to be a part of the diesel scene, just with diesels at that time. Of course, there was diesel enthusiasts who wouldn't mind having a bash, as they still do. And if we're talking steam Railtours, mainline steam restarted in 1971, obviously with King George V.
So when I said that we didn't know much about it, I said that me and Jordan didn't know much about it, and Will knows a hell of a lot.
No,
So
I know.
thanks, Will.
I know nothing about the background of how rail tours are put together, especially nowadays. It's so complicated. We only know the bare minimum of what people like the Railway Touring Company and Steam Dreams and Safos alike all have to go through to get a rail tour to actually run
And I
on the
think
line.
there's a lot of speculation of how it is actually done. There's never been anything official or any guidelines have gone there. Right, this is how we run rail tour. There's nothing like that. Be very interesting to read though. Definitely, if that ever came about, it would be a very interesting read. I
Yeah.
think
Oh, actually, you remind me. I had a DVD given to me a few years ago of the background operations of West Coast Railways. I mean, it was 2010, when the DVD was filmed. But it's incredibly interesting seeing how a because they're a train operator more than a rail tour operator. They do have their own railtours, but they mainly hire stuff out and run railtours for tour promoters. But it's just interesting to see how they maintain the locomotives, they maintain the rolling stock, they maintain relations with Network Rail, and how they developed as a company since they started up in the 90s. After obviously Carnforth was used as a base for locomotives in the 70s and 80s. You know, when BR were running tours over the Settle and Carlisle, when that was enough, because the Settle and Carlisle was particularly famous for rail tours. I mean, it still is nowadays, isn't it?
I think there's one place I'd love to do a rail tour is over the Settle and Carlisle. It must be like it's amazing by normal train, and I think just where when we chased the Great Britain,
Yeah,
when we seen the Indy Line track hammer over there a couple of years
yeah.
ago, I was just thinking watching it go over. I was like, I'd love to be on there just to be right next to that loco, just pounding away at this hill.
I've done it countless times by regular train and probably 3 or 4 times by Railtour now, on the Winter Cymru Mountain Express by Rail Touring Company. They are a super company at providing those winter trips, and winter is like the perfect time of year to do the Settle and Carlisle. There's no leaves on the trees, still snow on the fells as well. So
So that's a bit of advice from us: is if you're gonna go on a rail tour across the Settle and Carlisle, when everything calms down, do it in the winter. That's Will's top tip. My first rail tour, if I can remember rightly, I was quite young. I think I was about 9 or 10, and my dad took me on a rail tour from Poole to Bristol. Poole to Bristol. I'm still trying to work out what locomotive it was. It was either Tangmere or Britannia that ran that tour. Probably done by
we love a
Railway.
bit of. I don't think the Brit was on the main line then. Oh no, actually, yeah, no, I think it was around 2010 or 11 it came back. I think
Yeah,
in
Yeah,
black.
yeah, I was gonna say it came in black and
yeah,
black,
no, I
didn't it?
remember it. I remember it being in black, so it must have been around then.
Yeah,
Around when I was 10, and we went up from Poole to Bristol, and it was fascinating. Fascinating, the noise, the sound, the people. Everyone was so lovely on the rail
yeah,
tour. It's a brilliant atmosphere, and especially
yeah.
to be able to experience something going at speed as opposed to on a heritage line where you're very limited. It was absolutely brilliant, and it brought my love for railways. And then since then, I'd always want to go on a rail tour every summer.
If we're talking like first experiences with Railtours, so I'm told. I don't remember this personally because I was 3 at the time. My first mainline Railtour experience was the Hastings unit, and I don't remember what the route was. But Dad said that was my first Railtour experience, and then the first one I actually remember, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, um, and we did a Cathedrals Express to Canterbury behind. That was the early days of Steam Dreams, so that was 73096 on the green train from the Midhants. Proper good trip that was. And the other rail tour which I remember from around that time was we did a daylight rail tour. And they used to start at Alton or Alsford, depending on the day. And the idea was daylight rail tours, you go out during the daylight, but they used to start at a ridiculous time of day. They used to start at like 5:30 from Alsford or something, um, and you'd go to any which way destination. They've On that particular day we went to the Dean Forest Railway, um, and I remember, and Gloucester, and I remember. Oh, that was it. The train was called the Gloucester Javelin. I still remember that, and it was 73096 again. But I remember we had a heck of a run down the western main line. It absolutely hammered down there.
For
that
me, it was I've got under the 70s too because I've done when I was like a part tour, and then I did a full tour about a year later. For me, the first one was Bitten when it was in its 4492, the New Zealand guys. and it went. I did it from Bournemouth to Weymouth, so it was a Dorset Coast Express,
Yeah,
and then it was 37 first sort of like mini tour
that's
experience.
that's a part fair, probably, isn't it? That one.
Yeah, it was a thing that was run in the local paper. Weirdly, it was a
Oh, really?
yeah. I've never ever seen it again. It was just that one year. It
Oh,
was an
wow.
advertisement in the Bournemouth Echo, and it was like 45 quid each, and
Well,
like
you can't go wrong, to be honest with that.
no, because I spent that summer, a lot of that summer chasing them, like at Christchurch, Bournemouth, and it was a mixture of Tangmere and Bitton, and I didn't know I was going on it that day, so I was just like at Bournemouth station, seeing it come in, and Granny was like, "Oh, do you want to go on it? We got tickets." I'm like, "What?" And I was like,
Cracking stuff.
"Yeah, it was a cracking run." And then the first full tour I think was a year later, and it was a 47 up to Bristol, and then it was double-headed with Oliver Cromwell and 6024.
Oh,
The 6024 leading all the way down to Plymouth and back.
wow. A Plymouth run.
Yeah, Plymouth run. It
Oh,
was
proper job. Double header over the Devon Banks. Don't mind that.
yeah, it was incredible. Of course, obviously with Dawlish in there, I've always like everybody down south and maybe quite a few people up north, they admire Dawlish.
I'd say that's another top tip. If you want to go on a rail tour down south, do one that goes along Dawlish because
Yeah,
it
do
is
the
amazing.
West Country.
Yeah,
Anything in the West Country is superb. The scenery is just fantastic.
and the brilliant thing
And they
is
always,
there's quite a lot of competition at the moment. At least there was, because there's a fair few operators that like to run down to the West Country. So you always will.
yeah,
There's much more of a chance you have an opportunity of having a tour.
yeah. I mean, for years it's been the Torbay Express has been um, the tour promoter down there.
Yeah,
I know. Sadly, they aren't continuing with their operations anymore. Um, so people like Safos and West Coast and Road and Company are going to have to take over from that. But um,
because aren't
yeah,
Sapos running this year? They're on about resuming soon, and there's one potentially later on this year down that route.
yeah. Well, last year I think was last year the first year English Riviera's Mike.
No, it was the year before, I believe,
So
because I think I went.
2018.
I think I went on the first. I went on either the first or second one that they did, because
Yeah.
they were at the time they were running promotional tickets, so it only cost 45 or 50 quid each
That's
for
Yeah.
good.
a tour
That's
all the
really
way
good.
from Bristol to Paignton or
Yeah.
Kingswear, and that was
Yeah.
brilliant. And then they've continued doing those type of tours, although they did release this year. They were expanding the operation, so instead of starting from Bristol, they were starting the tour from Cardiff or Newport.
With Diesel as far as Bristol
Diesel as far as
or
Bristol,
something.
yeah. So
That's good.
probably trying to expand their reach a bit.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing with Railtours, particularly now, is you start with a diesel. You can start earlier on in the day because the diesel and the crew can go and stay at the place where they're starting overnight, or start in the middle of the night and go there. But yeah, Safos have been great at, and as an upcoming company. But yeah, George, you were saying about how they look like they're going to be one of the first Railtour companies to restart soon amidst the COVID-19 crisis. Um, and I read on their website earlier on how they want to reintroduce. I think they're going to start with they're going to start in the middle of July, as far as I'm aware, with the Felsman. That's another operation they've taken over, is the Felsman. They've got the Settling Carlisle and the English Riviera, so they're well and truly sorted.
Now we've segued from our very first to what we're looking at the present, is how rail tours have been run recently, with the new operator Safos Tours, which have been they're basically starting to take over routes that
They
have
are.
been run
They are.
previously.
Well, I think the good thing about Locomotive Services Limited and Hoskins' operation is that he's got crew, and crew is pretty much slap bang in the middle of the country. He can go any which way he wants up and down the country, and he can get there quickly. It's the one thing that I think And West Coast addressed their issue of being cornered in the northwest by having their own base in Southall, which has been great for them. They've been able to work out there, but I mean, Safos is you can run a Settle and Carlisle trip out and back in a day, a Cardiff trip out and back in a day, and he can now do the English Riviera without being too far from home.
And even then, I think he obviously must get on quite well with people within the first group, obviously, because of the fact that
Yeah,
during last year he obviously had the English Riviera services, and he stabled a locomotive at St Philip's Marsh. At the end of the day, it's business, really, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
I think one thing that I've noticed a lot is people don't look at it like that. They look at it as a rail tour company. In my head, I thought that there's two types of business models for a company of that form. There's the enthusiast base, so
yeah,
you're sort of like your ones that focus on like track tours, locomotive tours, or an operator tour. So like the Pathfinders, they normally do every year.
yeah.
Um, I,
Pathfinder are very good at doing their track bashing tours, and that's a great example of a company for enthusiasts.
exactly, and also they do their DRS tour. I think they have one booked for this year. I think it might have been postponed. No, it's the Blue Boys tour. It's basically a mixture of DRS locomotives over, I think, 1 or 2 days, and it's just literally everything. So 57, 68, 88, um, literally everything DRS. There'll be one on the tour, and it normally starts in Eastleigh. And that's one thing I've also noticed with them. They started at a hub for train enthusiasts. So Eastleigh,
Yeah,
Derby. They don't. But then, as you said, you got Statesman, who are like a luxury company, and they
and
start at big places.
they start at Birmingham. I mean, I've probably travelled on at least four different promoters, rail tours, and mainly as an enthusiast. Always gone with standard class. Would love to try first class. I got a mate who did first class with Rower Touring Company a couple of years ago, and he did first class with vintage trains last year. He did a run down the Welsh marches, and he said it was really enjoyable, worth every penny of paying first class.
When I went on my last rail tour with Safos, normally I'd go with my dad. As I said, I went with my dad every year, but this time I took my friends along, and my dad decided to treat him and his girlfriend to Premier Dining. And he went the full Premier Dining experience on Safos tours, and he said he absolutely loved it and thought it was worth every penny. He even got dressed up and he made sure he looked the part. For the first class and the Premier Dining, they had a nice carpet that they laid out at each platform, and it was just
Yeah, that's the thing is like when you have the entourage arrive and you lay out the carpet, it's really showing to the passengers waiting on the station that you're getting on. People have earned this journey, and it's all about making the passengers feel special, isn't it? That's what the sector is moving into now. Is really luxury travel and making people feel special about it. And you've got companies like I think Steam Dreams are very much moving into that now because their standard class prices are even a bit more than people like Pathfinder and but it's just more expensive running a steam train now. Steam tours have
that
traditionally been more expensive than a diesel tour.
that's what's happening. From what we've started talking about, he started in the in the early days of rail tours. It was done for fun. They didn't really. It didn't
Yeah.
really matter too much about the money. It was going a specific route or doing a specific running a specific loco.
Nowadays, because it's all private, you've got to apply for the path to Network Rail. You've got to pay for the path. Um, you've got to pay for the coaching stock in some cases. Like Pathfinder, they've got a heck of a job because they've got to hire. They've got to get the path from Network Rail. They've got to get the locomotive and the crew from DRS or from DB Schenker, whoever it is, and they've got to get the rolling stock from somewhere, and they've got to pay for all that individually. So no wonder ticket prices have soared in recent years.
Yeah, 100%. And another thing that would be taken into consideration if it's a steam tour is that water bowser that goes everywhere, and I mean
Yeah,
everywhere. Not,
that's right.
it's sort of you sort of feel like it's following you around the country because every time you see
That's right.
there's a West Coast one, and I think it's literally owned by West Coast.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
still
Yeah,
it's still got to pay to fill that up somewhere. So
it is. Yeah.
it's not a case of it's a free once it's paid for at the first point, it's paid for itself forever. It's still
Yeah.
got to be. I think you probably hold a couple of thousand gallons, a couple hundred gallons of water, shortly.
Oh, and the rest.
So it's with how prices have had to go up and up and up because the costs of hiring getting the what's the word, the journey, getting it from Network Rail, getting the path from Network Rail,
Yeah.
paying for hiring the locomotive in, hiring the rolling stock in, making sure that it's all maintained properly, getting a water truck if they're going to make a water stop, getting the water truck hired in. It brings the running costs up and up, which is why we're starting to see the prices of Railtours are going up and up. And that's another reason why Safos are doing so well, is because they can keep their prices a bit lower because everything's in house. He's got
That's
his own
right.
locomotives, he's got his own rolling stock, so all he has to do is pay for the pass from Network Rail. And
100%.
I think I don't know, I'd assume because he's doing paths that many other rail tour companies have done, he's being able to get a bit of a better deal because it's something that's already been done many times before.
I think particularly some of the routes that LSL choose are very selective for the amount of traffic that route receives. Particularly, like the Settle and Carlisle is such a popular route to pick because it's an hourly service between Carlisle and Leeds, and there's nowhere near the same amount of freight traffic on that line as there was 10 years ago, because all of the coal industry has died down now, and that's the main sort of traffic that would use that route. So there's barely any other trains to conflict with. So that's why West Coast love it for the Dalesmen. That's why Safos loves it for the Felsmen, because they've got 2 hours free time to play with. But you're completely right. With the whole thing about in-house stuff, it means that companies have been able to start regular trains. West Coast do the Jacobite. They basically run the West Highland line. They also do Railtour Company do the Dorset Coast. So you've got a regular once a week train from London to Weymouth, and because it's regular, they get bookings out pretty much filled out every week because West Coast are using their own stock, their own crews, their own engine. Sometimes they have to hire one in, yes.
But yeah, in the summer season, it feels like there was like a rail tour every day. So Tuesdays there was sort of your sort of salesman, or was it the salesman or the salesman
It
on
was
a
the
Tuesday?
Dalesman on a Tuesday.
Salesman on a Tuesday. Wednesday was Dorset Coast Express,
Yeah.
and then Thursday was the Scarborough Spar Express.
Yeah, the Scarborough Spa, I remember when I was going on holiday to Yorkshire as a kid, they used to do it Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 3 days in a row from start at York, go around the Wakefield Loop, and then back down to Scarborough. All the Harrogate Loop, it changed over the years, but
Yeah, I remember when I was up on holiday with my granddad a couple. I'm talking about 4 or 5 years ago. It was during the steam ban as well. I think it was 2015, 2016 steam ban.
East Coast Mainline has always been a hot spot
Hotspot. Yeah.
for
It was,
steam bans.
and I just rolled up into York, and there was a load of West Coast coaches in the platform. I was like, "What? What are you doing here?" Anyway, obviously there was the Scarborough Spar Express, and it was 47,580 on the front, and I was just like, "Ah, hello." It's the sort of thing, like that's one thing I love about this is when a railroad just appears, you do not expect it, especially when you're younger, and you didn't
Yeah,
have stuff like real-time trains and stuff like that and tracks. So you just didn't have that, and it was. I think that in a way it was nicer.
Yeah, I mean, talking about the early days of not only being on rail tours but seeing rail tours. When you were a kid, you never really did much with the internet. Like there was, there's the websites. Now the websites are quite big that tell you every rail tour that's going on, every loco movement. But you never really looked at that when you were a kid, and it was just really nice when suddenly one day your dad would just go, "There's a rail tour coming through our local station. Should we go see it?" Oh my god, a rail
yeah,
tour,
yeah.
and you just go and see it.
There's a very classic case of that for me. I remember way before the days of the internet. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I was in my living room, and I could suddenly hear. I heard a bullied whistle, and I was like, "No, surely not." And I was like, "No, I'm gonna go and check." Ran upstairs, and then sure enough, Tangme was heading off down the Bogner branch, and I was like, "And we had no idea."
I had two when I was a kid as well. I don't know if my dad knew or not, but it was Clan Line, and it wasn't on. It was doing a tour. It was doing the. Do you know, many years ago, did the first run of the Bournemouth Bell. They did a run of it in 2016, but I think about 2006, 2007, they did a run of it as well. And I just happened to be in Poole, and I was just like, oh, it's Clan Line.
Just that surprise of seeing something, especially something as incredible of a steam locomotive as Clanline is, just to see
Yeah,
that appear at one of my local stations. And I had the same thing with Western Champion. This is talking about diesels, but Western Champion. I saw a rake of Mark Ones in Weymouth platform. I was like, that's strange. I've not seen that there very often. And on the front was Western Champion, and that was good. So got to see that go out of Weymouth Station. So it's just amazing those times when you're younger and you have no idea that something's happening, and then suddenly you just get that really nice surprise of a Railtour coming through. And as you said,
Yeah,
Jordan,
we're
it's something that we seem to be missing now with the days of how big the internet is and how everything would just get broadcasted immediately.
100%. And I think on that point, I think we should leave it there for this episode. I think this is a topic we could
We
go
could
on
probably talk for hours. Yeah.
Yeah, 100. But
There's a lot more you can talk about, things like track bashing and loco haulage and whatever.
If you'd
100%,
like to
and I
see
think that
that, we will do it. But I think
Yeah.
we'll just cut it a bit short now because we're getting on a bit for time. But it's been really fun to talk about Railtours because I can say for all three of us that we absolutely love them, and we want
Yeah.
them to keep going for years and years and years, as
And I
long as they
think-
can do.
And I think after this recording, we are going to be potentially looking at rail tours for next year. And
Yeah.
what we could potentially do. But for the future, for the episodes in the future, we're looking at doing this every 2 weeks. I know it hasn't been 2 weeks since the first one. It might be a little bit hit and miss with them till we all go back to normal or some form of it. But I think for now,
Unless something pops up in the news that we can talk about on the day and
On
get
the
it
day.
out.
So the first episode that we did, we just put it up on YouTube. But for this episode, fingers crossed, you will also be able to listen to it on various streaming services such as Spotify. So keep an ear out for that. Or
And
you'll
keep an eye on our Facebook page for any updates regarding that, of where it's up and how to find it.
there'll be a link as below as well on that for that because.
yes, in the description. Yes.
But that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, leave something below. What you want to see, what you thought, what's your rail tour stories. We'd love to hear them 100%. So for now, stay safe, stay well, and we'll speak to you soon.